So, picture this. A prophet, Zarathustra, has been up in the mountains for years, getting all enlightened. He finally comes down to share his wisdom with the world, but as he's walking, he gets this creepy feeling. He's being followed. And it's not a disciple, not an admirer. It's his own shadow, which has somehow come to life. A thin, exhausted, mysterious double.
I mean, really think about that. What happens when the darkest, most ignored part of yourself suddenly stands up and starts talking to you? It's a deeply unsettling idea, right? And that's the mystery we're going to unpack today, looking at it through two very different but equally brilliant minds. To make sense of this bizarre encounter, we've got two guides. On one hand, we have Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who actually wrote the story. For him, this is a parable about what happens when a whole culture loses its meaning. And on the other hand, we have Carl Jung, the legendary psychologist who looked at this story and basically said, yep, that's it. That's a perfect picture of a universal human drama, confronting your own self.
Okay, so let's really get into the scene. Zarathustra's on his path, and this thing is just trailing him. And it's not a monster, not in the classic sense. It's actually something way more disturbing. It's like a walking portrait of absolute emptiness.
Man, Nietzsche's description just gives you chills, doesn't it? This isn't just some guy who's tired from a long walk. No, this is a spirit that has broken every rule, torn down every idol, questioned every authority, and is now left with absolutely nothing. It's achieved total freedom, sure, but that freedom is a desert. It has nowhere to go.
And this is where our two thinkers really start to diverge. For Nietzsche, this exhaustion is philosophical. It's the burnout you get from deconstructing everything until there's nothing left. But Jung, he looks at this and sees a deep psychological problem. He'd say Zarathustra has been so focused on climbing to the spiritual heights that he's forgotten to be human. The shadow is thin because it's literally been starved of the meat of real, messy, everyday life.
But here's the thing. This shadow isn't just a quiet follower. It has something to say. And its words, well, they pretty much capture the entire crisis of the modern world. It's a cry from the void.
Nothing is true, all is permitted. Just let that sink in for a second. That single sentence is one of the most terrifying and powerful diagnoses of nihilism ever written. It's the sound of reality losing its foundation. No rules, no meaning, no floor beneath your feet. And that, right there, is why the shadow is so lost and weary.
So that one phrase diagnoses two different kinds of collapse. From Nietzsche's corner, it's radical nihilism. When nothing's true, you can't build anything. You can only criticize. You become a homeless critic. But from Jung's perspective, it's a profound psychological dissociation. The shadow is so cut off from the conscious self that it leads to this deep, paralyzing weariness that can easily sink into a major depression.
Which of course brings us to the big question, why now? Why does the shadow decide to show up at this exact moment, when Zarathustra is on his quest to become the Ubermatch, this perfected, ultimate version of humanity?
It's because the shadow is a mirror. For Nietzsche, it's a crucial reminder, hey, buddy, no matter how high you fly, you're still tied to your human, all-too-human self. You can't escape it. For Jung, it's an intervention. It's an ego correction. Zarathustra's gotten a little too high on his own supply, a bit too identified with being the wise prophet. The shadow taps him on the shoulder to say, Ahem, don't forget about me down here in the dirt.
And this feeling of being pulled down, it ties perfectly into one of Nietzsche's most famous ideas, the spirit of gravity, that force that's always trying to drag us down from our highest goals. And right here, this is the most beautiful tension between our two thinkers. For Nietzsche, this weight, this spirit of gravity is the enemy. It's the thing that stops you from dancing, and you have to fight it. But for Jung, that exact same weight isn't a burden at all. It's an anchor. It's the grounding force you need to stay sane. Without it, you just float off into fantasy and lose your mind.
So all of this builds to the story's climax. Zarathustra is trying to reach what he calls the great noontide, this moment of perfect self-realization. But as he gets closer, he looks behind him, sees that dark figure, and he completely panics. He gets terrified of the very thing he's created.
And what happens next is, well, it's a tragedy. He runs. He runs from his own shadow. And from a Jungian point of view, this is the ultimate mistake. This is a total failure of integration. By running from the shadow, he's actually running from himself, and he's throwing away his only chance to become truly whole.
You know, when Nietzsche talks about achieving the shortest shadow at noon, it kind of sounds like he wants to get rid of it, but Jung offers this radical reinterpretation. He says the goal isn't to eliminate the shadow. That's impossible. The goal is to integrate it so perfectly that it's at your very center. It's not trailing behind you anymore. It's right there, at your core, holding you down to earth.
So, after all the drama, the chase, the running away, what's the final lesson? What's the path forward? Not just for Zarathustra, but for any of us who feels haunted by something in our own dark.
It all comes down to this one fundamental law, a law that both of these guys understood perfectly. You cannot have a bright light without casting a dark shadow. The desire to be pure light, pure goodness, pure wisdom, it's not just a fantasy, it's a dangerous one. That's how you starve your shadow and turn it into a demon.
And in the end, amazingly, both Nietzsche and Jung point to the same solution. You have to stop running. The wanderer needs a home, needs a goal. But, and this is the key, that goal can't be to escape the shadow. The goal has to include the shadow. A real Nietzschean yes to life means saying yes to all of it, especially the weary, broken, dark parts. That's the only way to be a true creator, by acknowledging your oneness.
So, you see, this story about Zarathustra's shadow isn't just some abstract philosophical fairy tale. It's a mirror, and it forces us to ask a really personal question. We all chase our own light, right? Our goals, our ambitions, our ideals. But in that chase, who is your weary wanderer? What part of yourself is trailing behind you in the dark, starved and exhausted, just waiting for you to turn around and finally see it?